voices. By the way, how many of you are new?
Rick the joint already.
Hey.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey.
I'm a designated interviewer and other stuff. So we're very happy to have you here. We do this many nights a week with lots of authors. So if you're new and you have a good time, you should sign up for our e-newsletter, and I will write to you and tell you all the things we're going to do. I try not to write to you too often. Sometimes I hear, but there we are. For any of you who are waiting for a Greg Giles update, I still don't have one, but I will let you know when and he really is ill. I mean, seriously ill. So when he recovers, he said he would come. So that's the best I can tell you at the moment. I know. It's a complication of the fact that he lost his leg and he decided to travel without a wheelchair and he just tied himself up in the knots. TMI, as he said to me. I'm not going to give TMI to you, but there we are. So I see our authors in the background, but they're talking.
It's the way it goes.
I hope
Some
I'm
point,
live.
they'll walk up here. You don't get a chance.
No, why not?
Okay, Jim, you're here for an event. Would you like to come up?
Oh, sorry. Oh, Jamie.
All right, ladies,
gonna give
let's
her the
welcome Jane Stanton, Hitchcock, and Linda Fairstein. She's gonna flash her amazing shoes at you. Janie, this is you. And Linda's over there where our two books are.
No shoes.
No shoes. No, you and I are cast into the shade by Jane. Right. Yeah, seriously, flash your feet. I mean, are those not great?
Ta-da!
Thank you.
They're real diamonds. There's a guard outside.
I will tell you a story about that in a minute. So ladies, since this is Jane's debut party for her book and Linda's almost debut party, would you like to drink a toast to each other or
I would like to
yourselves?
drink a
If
toast.
you want to hand me one.
To
You saved that one. You saved that one.
There we go. So,
So,
you
to you.
and to you.
And to you. And to you.
Yay! So, Linda and I have been together now for 20 books. Not quite. There was 1 year she was absent, and that was the year of 9/11 when Linda stayed in New York and did remarkable work instead of going on book tour. So otherwise, you have been here for Final Jeopardy. Yeah, you have to use your microphone. Okay. Is it on?
Good evening. So
Yes,
that's
there you are. So it's really been wonderful to watch Alexandra Cooper. This is book 20. And before that, Linda wrote a marvelous book, which you might remind us of because it was your nonfiction book.
called Sexual Violence, or War Against Rape, which was a nonfiction book about the work we'd done at the DA's office. But that was before I met Jane Hitchcock, who convinced me to write fiction.
Wow. But I gave you a book party for sexual violence.
The most
Remember? At
do I remember?
Remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic book party, and then we sat down together, and Linda said, do you think I could...
Get her mic.
Oh, sorry.
Here, take this one.
Oh, thank you.
You don't need to hear, you just need to buy a book.
If you can find them.
Try
I
it
said,
again. There you
so
are.
there, I guess so, I don't know. Am I
Get
doing
it right up to your mouth.
Just right like that?
Yeah.
When I drop this mic, it's gonna be because I can't figure it out.
No, because I know it's not.
Right. on?
Patrick, does she have a channel that's not working?
Maybe my hand
Hang on
just
a moment.
doesn't.
We may have a.
So while she's doing that,
Can you hear me?
let me say,
Could you do the actual?
That's better, is that better?
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, okay,
Turn it
I'll
up a
sing
little
now.
bit.
All right, so back to the book party.
So back to the book party. So Linda said to me, do you think I could write fiction? And I said, do I think so? I said, you are the natural of naturals because you are not only brilliant and articulate, but you have a few stories to tell. So we sat down and we
well,
figured it out.
that's only part of it. These are two of the women in the world I adore and admire most. Barbara believed in me from before the first book when my editor called and sent her the galley, just the way she's believed in Bluff, which we'll get to in a minute. And I met Jane on the tarmac of an airport in 1987 and fell madly in love with her. But the point she's making, or the point she didn't make about encouraging me to write, is most people in my life, with the exception of my husband and you, laughed at it. Thought, not possible, don't do it, you have a career. And we have one really good friend in common who, may I say, was a tad jealous that you had written and I might write. And so the negative energy against doing it from other friends was remarkable. And Jane was there. I'd pick up the phone and say, and now I've plotted this into a corner and I'm not quite sure even who the killer should be. And we would talk.
Yes.
We would talk for hours. So her skill at doing this, from those of you who've read her other books, and her generosity are remarkable. And then the role Barbara's played in this, in getting Bluff to you today. And may I say, I bought the first copy today.
So what we left out there, Jane, I'm sorry, Linda, is that you had a very interesting bet with your husband, which you won.
That's a quick aside. I had started the book and was prosecuting full time, so on my summer vacation, I wrote the first bit of the book, which got done around 65 pages, and then it was sold. And that's when I really needed to talk to Jane almost every day. It was not only therapy, but it was very, very specific advice about how to write and plot. And the next summer, when I had to finish it by Labor Day, my husband said, I'll bet you $1,000 that you can't finish it. And on the morning of Labor Day, when I typed at the end, named the prize, I was victorious. But Janie was there the whole way.
Well, she's paid me back a millionfold because I always label my emails to Linda in one of two ways: personal or technical support. How does it work when the lawyer doesn't put a brief in? What? You know, she knows everything. She's guided me through the legalese of this, not only just being a friend, but also being the person who knows more about cases and how to win them than anybody. So.
It's wonderful to have somebody useful owe you a favor.
I'll put that on the needlepoint pillow right there.
Let me just say that Linda's husband actually was a real prince. He was absolutely a lovely man. I don't want you to go away with the impression that, he was some sadistic jerk. Because he was truly fabulous. And I think if he bet you, it was actually to motivate you. It wasn't to discourage you.
Yes,
that
well,
would
that's
be my
because when
guess.
Jane and I spent time together, it wasn't always plotting and doing serious things. That would be for a quarter of the time.
Or really that much? I thought we really spent like 90% of the time gossiping.
A lot of gossiping,
Shopping
a little
for
shopping,
shoes.
exactly, a little shopping.
Yes, right.
So Jane lives in Washington, D.C., and Linda lives in New York and Florida. So, it's a good thing you've got all this communication channels. It's gotten easier since 1987, hasn't it?
Much easier, and we can't leave out that Jane lives in Washington, D.C. with a prince of a man. A husband she was not married to when I first met her, and she was single. And Jim Hoagland is not only her prince and believes in everything she does, he also happens to have won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. So if you need a little advice about rating, not a bad form of support. But yeah.
So Linda can't say this because she's had 2 princes as husbands, but you and I can say it's way better to have a happy ending.
Yeah, you said it, babe.
Right.
Yeah.
So we both are very fortunate. They're sitting in the back, so we're saying that too. We're very lucky that we married the right guy at the end. So those of you who may think there's no hope, just be brave. Anyway, Jane.
Yes.
I think one of the most interesting things about Bluff is you bring a poker with it and structure your book like a poker hand. So do you want to tell us
Yes,
how all that? How did you become a poker maven?
Yes, well, okay, so.
I know, but they don't.
Yeah, all right. So, I was going through a bad personal time with some financial difficulties, which is a real story, and I started playing poker to get away on the internet, but for fake chips, and it was just. My grandmother taught me how to play poker, but you know she was kind of a shark. But I knew what, but I just really had never really played poker. So I go on Poker Stars. I amass 16 million fake chips, and I say to myself, God, this is so easy. Let me just try it for real money. So I started playing for real money, and since my husband is here, I will tell you that one day he saw me in the supermarket and he said, "Sweetheart, what are you doing here? You said you were going somewhere." I said, "Well, nothing. There's a sale," and he said, "A sale in the supermarket?"
Yeah.
I was wiring money to Costa Rica on Poker Stars, and but online I wasn't me. I was Buffalo Bill, 239, an out of work, angry construction worker who was mad, bad, and dangerous to play with, right? And fuzzy slippers, I was sitting, and I'd sign on as Buffalo Bill, and they'd go, "Hi, Bill," and then I would ask Jim, I would say, "What can I say about the Redskins that's really sounds really good?" And I'd screw it up, but anyway. So, one day I logged online, I played a lot of tournaments. And one day, I got my cup of coffee, I got my fuzzy slippers, I was in my jogging suit, and there's a big banner, Internet Poker has been shut down. Because it was Black Friday, 2011, April 15th, a day that will live in infamy. And I was depressed for a year, and then I ran into a friend who said, "We have a home game, would you like to play in the home game?" And I thought, I would love, I said, sure. And then I thought, oh my God, they're going to see me as I really am, an old bat. How is this going to be? And so I go play in the home game, and one of the players came up to me and he said, "You have no idea what you're doing, but you have great card sense. I'll give you 3 lessons. 2 months later, I beat him in a tournament, in a casino. And I said, this game is for me. I just loved it. And I just started playing, and I got into the poker world, and I tell you, I have played poker with everybody from the Supreme Court Justice, no joke, to the guy who delivers takeout in a dive restaurant. I started to play in places where, the last place I played actually was illegal. I got held up at gunpoint. It was the longest running illegal poker game in DC, and it finally got held up.
I had to bail her out.
I wasn't there. Oh, yeah. But it's a good story. Yes, she bailed me out. I was in jail. So anyway, and now I play a lot of tournament poker, but because when you write, you never really stop writing, and so the addiction of writing and the addiction of poker melded, and I thought, I've got to figure out a way to do this sad story of my family. And it's sad, but it's uplifting in a way because I discovered a lot of things which were positive, but I melded them, and I thought, well, being underestimated, I put a guy in jail, I really did, and being underestimated at the poker table really helped me see that being underestimated in life is sometimes a great, great advantage. And that's what happened, and I realized that older women are invisible and we don't even have to disappear. And that's a real, real strength at the poker table because they think I'm going to play old lady poker. No.
Which is all a long way of telling you why the book is called Bluff. Right, it's actually structured like a hand of poker, so even if you don't play, you'll be able to figure it out. So Linda, you have delighted us for 20 years by exploring history and landmarks and aspects of New York City that most of us would have missed. So in book 20 here, Blood Oath, where are you taking us?
Okay, 2 things about Blood Oath. Thank you. I'm always looking for a place, and a lot of them in New York City hide in plain sight. I've been past the gates of Rockefeller University, originally called Rockefeller Institute. If you know New York, it's Upper East Side on York Avenue. It's been there since 1900. It has, even before I was there, elegant,
Before I was.
old bad, elegant wrought iron gates. And I just never knew what goes on there. It's called a university, as Mike Chapman would say. There is no football team, no cheerleaders. It's just, it's the country's premier medical research institute. And it was founded by John D. Rockefeller in 1900 because he had a grandson die of yellow fever, and he said, I have enough money to cure infectious diseases. So it's set up to study the rarest of diseases. And I had the good luck to sit next to a man at a dinner party when everybody was jockeying to sit next to captains of industry and movie stars and such. And he was a scientist at Rock U, and the smartest, most charming guy in the world. At the end of the evening, he said, would you come in and give my scientists a lecture on DNA and forensics, because we use DNA every day. And he said, in exchange, I'll give you a tour of the campus. And so an NYPD former lieutenant is the head of security, and he took me through the old hospital, 30 beds. You don't want to be there for any reason. They've worked on yellow fever, scarlet fever, polio, AIDS, Ebola, just the worst things. But when he got to the point where he said, you know, there are underground tunnels here, and they're so old that we really don't know where they go. So we haven't been in them for a while. And he said, hard hat, I'll give you the hard hat. You come back with sneakers, not Jane's sneakers, with sneaks and dungarees and whatever. And he took me underground, and I knew I had a setting. It's just a very dark, interesting place. And the other part of it is that the story I tell is actually based on a real case, not my own, of a man of great power and privilege who lives in Washington, D.C., and who did something horrible 20 years ago to a young woman who didn't go public till 3 years ago. And when she did, she tape recorded him, because he called her once a year saying, are you okay? Just one time a year. And for 19 years, she said, I'm okay. And the 20th year, she said to him, I'm not really okay. This has derailed my life. So I kind of take the seed of that story and tell a story about a very old crime. Could it be proved today, and what happened? So that all leads to Rock U. That is Blood Oath.
You know, you have a thing for tunnels.
I do have a picture tunnel. I'm claustrophobic.
Linda really loves tunnels. And there are fortunately a lot of them under New York, and they're a gift for a crime writer, because it's the only place you can really disable a cell phone at this point. I know, you know, I'm not saying it figures into this plot, but it was an important part in your book. Was it the Natural History Museum, or
Yes.
was it the Met?
Wow,
Was it the Natural
very
History
good.
Museum,
Yep,
right?
Yes, absolutely. The Bone Vault was one of the first places where the old steel structures, you get down far enough, and that's just what you need for the electronic devices to be, you know, she can't call 911, she can't call for help. So it is a device I have used before.
Well, I don't think it's a device. I think it's just handy. I mean, you didn't make them up, but
Right.
you take advantage of them. How do you come upon, this one was sort of serendipity, right?
Yes.
Have you sometimes picked out your spot, or have you lucked into them a lot of the time?
No, sometimes I pick them out. I know I've said this here before. In 1985, there was a murder in the Metropolitan Opera House, for real, of a violinist who went backstage between acts. And that attracted me because here's the cultural center of New York City. 4,000 people were in their seats when she was attacked and murdered between acts, and nobody could hear her scream because new opera houses are soundproof. So sometimes it's just there in plain sight, and I know if I scratch the surface there's a bad history, and sometimes it's it took just a little more serendipity to find it.
So when Alex was with the French guy, you did a wonderful book about New York, the restaurant scene. That was actually in many ways my favorite, because I'm a foodie, or at least I used to be. And that was really a lovely book. It was,
Thank you.
and it must have been a lot of fun to research, because you had to do hard things like go out to eat.
Which obviously I thrive on. But that was a bad romance before I married the good husband. So he'd been a restaurateur, and that's what got me
You
into
drew
that
on real
role.
life?
I drew on real life. I didn't kill him, but I could have done that.
Well, there's a cue to go back to love because Jane really has drawn on real life her mother
Yeah.
more than you. It was really there was I love the name of the actual bad guy because his actual name is Kenneth Starr, so we're all going to think it's that Kenneth, but it's not that Kenneth Starr. It's a different Kenneth Starr. Is it Kenneth L?
Kenneth Ira Starr.
Ira, right.
Yes.
So you might enjoy Googling him at some point. You should look up Kenneth Ira Starr and you will be amazed at the number of people that he basically suckered.
I'm an
fleeced.
episode of American Greed.
A good one.
I
American
am.
Greed.
I mean, my mother introduced Ken to everybody, from Mike Nichols to Lauren Bacall to Barbara Walters. I mean, she was responsible for his career. Unfortunately, I was responsible for bringing him into my mother's life, but that's another story. But in terms of real life, I've always been a character in Linda's books.
Right. So.
And so I returned the favor. And in
So
Bluff,
Joan Stafford,
Yeah.
Alex Cooper's beloved friend, is Jane Stanton Hitchcock, the Joan from her mother's name.
yes.
That's what I took. And
I
her
forgave
mother,
you for
by
that.
the way, right? And Jane's mother, Joan, was the first Lois Lane actress on radio. So there's a little history of histrionics in the family.
But she didn't love that, you know. She dismissed that because she was also a Shakespearean actress. She was on Broadway. She had her own television show for a while. I mean, and the Superman thing is the only thing that people want to hear about now. You know, the kids I play poker with, you know, they don't know anything before 1970, so they've never heard of Shakespeare. And so all they want to know is, oh my God, your mom was Lois Lane. That's so awesome. And that's what I get asked about most about my mother. But so when I was writing Bluff, I said I need a great lawyer. And so Linda is Lydia Fairley in the book. But there's another Linda who really also helped me, Linda Kenny Bodden, who is a great lawyer as well. And she is a poker player, and we met at a poker game. And yeah,
Yes.
I met her at a poker tournament, and we bonded because, you know, when you're in a sea of testosterone and, you know, you have long hair and you're wearing whatever, bangles.
Surely not bunny slippers, though. Tell me you left them at home.
No, I tried to look pokery today. Although I don't really wear the diamond shoes, although I'm thinking of it, you know.
You know what? You could use them to reflect the cards.
I
You could do a really clever cheat. Just a thought.
And a good one. And so then she really guided me through the EED defense, which is part of the book, and she makes a cameo. I gave Linda the saving grace of the saving me.
But the other Linda, can I just say, is one of the most prominent defense attorneys in the country.
Yeah, she is.
And you can Google her, if you saw the Phil Spector murder movie on TV, and Helen Mirren played Linda, and she's just, so so she's been a friend of mine for a long time. When I see these two brilliant women at a poker, guess who I met last night? And they're playing poker. Linda should be practicing law. You should be writing books more often because they're wonderful. Too long between these great books of yours. And but there they are together having a blast at the poker table.
Absolutely, and we're usually talking about poker. They say, well, what are you talking about? We talk about poker, not crime, you know. So, but
I'm very sympathetic. Rob and I met at a tournament, playing tournament bridge against each other.
a much
It
more
was really
elevated
dramatic.
game, I must say.
You know, Rob accused me of cheating. Director was summoned to the table. Don't you give your rendition, Roosevelt. I don't want to hear it. The director was summoned to the table, and the director ruled in my favor, which was not really the best way to start a relationship. So I really understand. But here's the thing. we gave it up together because in our experience of tournament bridge playing, which is actually more stressful than doing surgery, there have been whole studies, no, I'm serious, there have been whole studies shown that playing tournament bridge is more stressful than doing surgery, you know. No relationship has really survived it. So we thought, you know, we were old enough and wise enough at that point to recognize that we had to give it up if we wanted to, you know, live together. So every morning they have these stupid bridge hands in the Arizona Republic. And every morning we sit there, we do the bridge hand, you know. He reads it, he passes it over to me, and he'll say, seriously. Or sometimes it's a good one. I mean,
So
they're not all
were you in
stupid.
fact cheating? I know they rule
I
in your
can
favor,
hardly
but
believe you asked me that as your editor. This may be it. No,
I hope you were actually. They got away with it.
there's the thing about I don't know why we're digressing. Well, I started it, so I'll finish it. Here's the thing about bridge, and the reason it is such an incredible challenge is that you are limited to just a few words. You can, you know, the four suits, you can say hearts, spades, clubs, or diamonds, or no trump, meaning there's no, and you can use the numbers 1 to 13, and you can say pass or double. What? I'm sorry, you're right. I knew he was going to get into this. Right? Anyway, you have a very, very limited vocabulary out of which you have to communicate all this information to your partner about what's in your hand and whatever. And so occasionally the tone of your voice can give away something. Rob's contention was that I did an interrogative 4 clubs, as in 4 clubs? And my contention was I did a declaratory 4 clubs, as in 4 clubs, which meant something entirely different. And so the director chose to believe me. Did I actually did an interrogatory 4 clubs?
Yeah.
I can't possibly remember.
No, exactly.
That's my defense. Right? It is. Still, but I mean, I really understand about the poker thing because it is an addiction. Games are an addiction. You know, you can really get into them. It's like betting, or you know. Anyway, let's talk about Maud, because it's hard to imagine with the 3 of us sitting here that a woman in her late 50s could walk into a restaurant and be so invisible because she's so anonymous that she could shoot somebody and walk out, right? Because that wouldn't happen to any of us, right? We would walk into the Four Seasons and everybody would go, "Oh, look, it's Linda."
It's Jane Hitchcock.
So your chances of actually shooting a guy and walking away are 0. But there is, as you point out, often a sort of cloak of invisibility that drops over one's head.
Oh, for sure. And I can tell you, I say this in the book, that had an African American man or a Hispanic man walked in, they wouldn't have even gotten close to the table. I mean, it's just the whole nature of society is that the perceptions we have of people are often so very wrong. And if you use these perceptions in a murderous way, as I did, they're helpful, but in other ways, they're not helpful. And to underestimate anyone in any sphere, but particularly at the poker table, is a big mistake. Yeah, you don't want to do that. But you don't want to really do it in any sphere of life. That's one thing that I really learned, is that you cannot underestimate people. And I mean, I think using a weakness as a strength is one of the great lessons that I learned from poker.
So that's how the book starts. Maud, who is impoverished, manages to find a few relics from her former fabulous wardrobe,
Right.
enough to get her in the door of the Four Seasons, because you can't just show up, you know, in bunny slippers and other stuff. And so she goes in and she shoots, and then she disappears, and then the question was this really the person she was shooting, and what goes on from there? And I can't say anymore because we'll ruin it, but
yeah,
she does go underground with her poker community, so, you know, the fact that they're operating legal poker games is a great place if you're actually hiding out, right?
well, that's another thing about the book, is that a lot of my social friends in the book abandoned me, and my poker friends in the book, they helped me. And that's one thing that I always write about society, is that you just cannot trust the smiles and the, you know, the glamour of society at all, because it's these people are so neurotic, most of them. And money exaggerates who you are. If you're good, you will be better. But if you're bad, you're going to jump right down on the devil's trampoline. And what you see, all those smiling faces, I sometimes feel sorry for these kids who are looking at Kim Kardashian and looking at all these glamorous folk and thinking, oh, I wish it were. You don't wish you were those people. You don't. You know, you're much better off wishing you were happy, not wishing you had money. Because money is a curse. It attracts people to you who shouldn't be attracted to you, and it can warp your sensibility. So that's another theme of the book.
Which has been true of many lottery winners. Yeah, it really has. All right, so what else would you like to say about Blood Oak? Let's talk a little bit about Alex in recovery, because you left her in a really bad place in your last book, and I imagine a lot of people would like to know how she's doing.
So in Devil's Bridge, 3 books ago, something bad happened to her. She obviously survived it, and then in the 2 books after that, including Deadfall, she was on a leave of absence and trying to get back. And I had such mail, may I say, in the old days when I started writing. It was hard to write to an author because you didn't know where the author lived, and you had to pay for a stamp and have stationery, and you know, now with social media people find you. But I got so many complaints about Alex being whiny and not standing up for herself, and not, well, where's the old Alex Cooper? And so that really helped me craft this book. And it starts in the first scene. She's in the courtroom. She's defending a young colleague who's being bullied by a judge. And scene 2, she's in her office faced with a very difficult new case. And I think she's back in full force. I think that's really what I was trying to do in this book, was give her a very complex situation and see if how she could deal with it.
But people feel connected to Alex, and that's why they wrote to you. And it's like Conan Doyle with the Reichenbach Falls. They said, how could he die? What? And I think they said to Linda, you know, we know this character in some ways better than you do at this point. Could you please bring her back to her brilliant self? And that's what you've done so brilliantly. And I really think, you know, you got that lesson from Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes, right?
Yes, I think that's exactly what I was drawing from when I got that lesson. And I would say, in addition, that I wish you all somebody in your professional lives who does for you what Barbara Peters does for those of us she takes under her wing, and then befriends as well. And in your personal lives, if you have one friend like Jane Stanton Hitchcock, you would just be blessed beyond measure.
Well, ditto squared. And if I must say, and if you kill me off in your book, I know we're not friends anymore. That's one way to do it. I mean, some people just get tweeted off, but you could actually kill me in the book. But Barbara, I owe everything, because I wrote this book. It was a very difficult book to write, oddly enough. It doesn't not going to look difficult, but I went through 19 drafts, and originally it was going to just be published digitally. And Linda said, don't do it. She said, send it to Barbara.
Let's talk to Barbara. Nobody
Let's
knows
talk to Barbara.
this genre and books and publishing better than Barbara.
And she read it, and she loved it, and she said, I can help you with this. And she did, and now, you know, it's just like a different book. And so it's not, you know, I actually rewrote it in 4 days, but that's another story. But if it hadn't been for Barbara's faith in me, I'll say that you're here, so I can say it right to your face.
I need to give a shout out to my co-editor, Annette Rogers.
Absolutely.
Annette actually may have had more to do with how this book turned out than I did.
Well, and may we give a shout out to the cover, to Holly.
Oh, yeah.
The cover is so brilliant. And then I'm gonna out Holly a little bit, because she told me she hadn't read it before she did this cover, which is the most perfect cover ever. And it's just, I think it's helped, you know, sell the book, and it's so chic. It's everything I could have dreamed of, plus the blood. It was just so wonderful, every detail.
When when Rob and I were traveling last fall, I stumbled into a hat store in Romania, and oh my God, there was the hat. And I know. So I bought it. It was like, you know, probably $7.95 in Romanian money or something.
You
but
spent $4 million sending it to me.
no, I actually packed it and, you know, and brought it home because I couldn't resist, you know, the idea of sending it to Jane as a pre-publication present.
So
But
awesome.
you're not actually wearing it.
I
which
should
was-
have worn it.
Yes, that was part of
In my
So
face.
when you're doing tours later, tour side,
yes.
I want you to wear the hat and send me a photo.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll try.
With bunny slippers. Put on your bunny slippers and the hat, and it'll be a winner all the way around. Really was. I was very fond of Jane's work before this ever came up. She wrote a book called Social Crimes, which is that the Washington D.C. book?
No, that's New York.
No, it's New York. Which is the Washington one?
Mortal Friends.
Mortal Friends. If you want to know how Washington works, you should read Mortal Friends because it really is absolutely skewers the social scene in Washington and the women who have power behind the men.
I got banned from a lot of parties in Washington when I wrote Mortal Friends. I was so happy. I hate parties, you know, so they thought, oh, we won't invite her. But it was really interesting, you know, there was one woman who said, well, I couldn't invite you because so-and-so, the woman who I skewer in the book, was coming. And I said, you know, in a town where the Israelis are having dinner with the Iranians, you know, I just didn't think my presence at this party for 100 people was really going to make all that much difference. And what has happened now is that, well, it turns out that I was right, and so now they want me to come to their parties again, you know, and it's too late.
You know, what's really interesting
I'm at a
about
poker
that,
game.
that we've heard this from so many authors, that real people they put in their books never recognize themselves.
Yeah.
Never,
Oh,
never.
that is real. When I wrote Social Crimes, there was a gossip in there called June Kahn. And a woman called me up and said, you know, I love every one of your characters, but the most unbelievable one is June Kahn. And I wanted to say, thanks, bye, June. I modeled this character on her. She's the biggest gossip who ever lived, you know?
Is there anything you'd like to ask each other before we turn this over to questions?
I would just like to ask her if she'll always be my friend.
I will always be your friend, but here's what I'd like to ask you. You haven't given me an answer. The nice thing about having a friend like this who's also a writer, we have each given the other more book parties. Jane's given me a dinner party or a lunch for every book, and I've tried to do the same. It gets hard when you've written a lot of books because nobody wants to give you that many parties. But you haven't told me, you know, we have to talk about a party
No
later
more
in April.
parties. I just want to go to a casino and tournaments. That's the thing. I really can't stand parties anymore. We had the best of parties. Let's face it.
We've had, yes,
Remember our dear friend. Yes.
yes, your dear friend.
Yes.
She's talking about Jacqueline Onassis, the first book party. Jane was very close to Jacqueline Onassis. Actually read the 23rd Psalm, was invited to read it at the memorial service. And Janie gave her first book dinner for me
With
with.
Mrs. Onassis, who wanted to meet Linda because she loved her work.
Well, and she was an editor, don't forget that she did spend at Doubleday. This is Paul, the
this is-
bookstore dog.
this is-
Who belongs to Pat. Yes, he slinks about, and he's just lovely.
He's the
So,
cutest ever.
yes, he's great, and we're not letting him up any closer because dogs always steal the show.
They're welcome to
He
be
might
with you.
might lick the diamonds
That
off
would be
your
just
shoes.
welcome to them.
I see.
I love
Well,
dogs.
all right, so I have one final question, and I really want to hear Jane's answer because I probably know your answer. Are you working on another book? No, you, not her. You go first.
So push Jane to do it, but yes, I am working on Coop 21. The word graveyard appears somewhere in the title.
Good.
I have my. I need a second word, so work on it with me. And so I have my setting, most of my setting, and it was a long time between books this time, and I promise this won't happen again. I was in purgatory and was coming to your beautiful city in July for 3 or 4 years, and I'm now back on a more civilized schedule. So I hope I'll be invited next year about this time with graveyard something or something graveyard.
You say it was a long time between books. You've written 20 books in 20
This
years.
was a
Help
year
me,
and a half
Rhonda.
cycle, because she had to go from July, when normally she would have been here last July, and instead, it's all the way to March, so it's been, a year and 3/4. That's
For
about
those
right.
of us who don't play poker, Jane,
Right.
it's a normal
And I
time.
have just remembered, and in bridge, thank you, Rob, you get to say the letters 1 to 10, and then you can say Jack, Queen, King, Ace, so there are 14 words. Sorry, dear, I had a blank. So tell me, Jane, are you thinking
Well,
about writing a book?
I think that writing is an addiction, as is poker, and I prefer. Well, I could try to think, is writing a calling or an addiction?
I think it's an addiction.
Writing.
Whoa.
Writing, yeah. And is poker an addiction or a calling? I'm trying to sort that out. But the thing is,
Either
it's
way, you're
probably,
hooked.
probably an addiction. Yeah, I am working on a book. A book that I was working on. I'm always working on a book, but I was working on it before I really dived into Bluff, thanks to you. And yeah, it's called The Ghost Wife. Thank
It's a
you.
great title.
Thank
Great
you.
title.
Thank you. Copyright.
Jane's really a super writer, and if you have a chance to read her earlier books, I highly recommend them. So at this moment, I'm going to say goodbye to our Facebook audience, and thank you very much for joining us.